So Caitlin is joining us. Caitlin is a cohort 1 graduate. I believe this is your first night TAing, right, Caitlin?
Yeah, I don't have any other nights like officially on the schedule, but I probably will be filling in here and there as needed.
Caitlin is our kind of go-to substitute when a TA can't make it in. Caitlin has not only gone through the program, obviously back in cohort 1 all the way back in 2019, but she has had a awesome career as a junior developer. She got hired at Raymore and Flanagan right after the boot camp. She then came over and worked with me at Tuzag, and as of Monday, she started a job at SU. So awesome career path. I'm going to hand it over to you, Caitlin, just in case you have any words of wisdom or advice to share or anything like that.
I didn't prepare anything, but maybe by the end of class, I'll have something to share with you guys. But I'm happy that I get to actually be in class because I miss it. I don't do it often, mostly because I'm always super busy working, but I also have a 9-year-old daughter who's busier than I am most of the time with all of her stuff going on. So yeah, I'm happy to be here though.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We are continuing on with our portfolio today. That should be no surprise there. Looking forward to diving into that. But before we do, let's kick it off with our standard stand-up. What did we learn yesterday? Did we have any light bulb moments? Did anything click that made sense? Where are we at? We went over coolers, which is a good palette generation tool. We learned about semantic HTML tags, which are just, instead of using a more generic div, it is more of a descriptive label about what kind of content is going to be inside that HTML element, which is helpful for screen readers and accessibility. So instead of just the generic div, the screen reader would be able to read out like, hey, this is a new section of the website. We dove into Flex just a little bit, just to give you a taste of it, of how we can lay out content dynamically, depending on the screen size and that kind of information. We also dove into those media queries, right? On that Netflix site, trying to get that message to pop up, the screen size was a little too small. So later tonight, we are going to, or maybe tomorrow, I'm not sure quite yet, we are going to dive into another way that we can make our site responsive. So instead of using media queries built straight into the CSS, we are able to use the responsive grid system and be able to kind of lay out our content depending on what screen sizes we're designing for. So then everything that you guys were learning in Flexbox Froggy, we kind of translated into Bootstrap, right? And we were able to read through that documentation and see what classes were available to us in Bootstrap. And a good analogy for that is kind of when we did the text center and we added that as a class. Well, we can add that as a class because Bootstrap provides that to us as a utility. Well, why wouldn't we just go in the CSS and target whatever div we wanted and say text align center? Well, we could. It's just a couple lines less of code to use that text center than it is to dive into writing our own custom CSS for that. So there's no real advantage one over the other according to the computer. It's just which makes more sense in your code. So if the alignment, the flex alignment utilities make more sense to you in Bootstrap, that can be a great way to add in those classes and get your content aligned just the way you want. However, if you're a CSS person and that's what's making sense to you and that's where you feel like you can make your impact or what clicks, there's nothing wrong with writing out your own CSS for that, because how does Bootstrap make all of this work? They just have written that CSS for you. We also got into position absolute, right? Where we were able to say, hey, this arrow should be positioned 30 pixels off the bottom of the screen, and dove into that a little bit more. And then we learned about how to use our first anchor tag, right? How to make it so that when we click on that arrow, it automatically scrolls us down to the right section of the page. So that's all a good review yesterday. Thank you guys for contributing all in the chat for that. Was there anything, did we have any questions that pop up? Does anyone have some code from yesterday that wasn't quite working that they want to review? Were there any concepts that we didn't get or terms that were used that we didn't really know the definition of? How are we feeling? Does anyone need help before we get kicked off tonight?
I don't think it was really what we learned yet. Well, I guess it kind of was, but one thing that kind of clicked was that like us using Bootstrap for more than us just placing a link in the top of the code and kind of seeing what else that it really has to offer us. Sometimes with, and then when I kind of asked yesterday about, like how would we have known to use like the Flex and Bootstrap or whatever, just kind of clicking as far as how to think through where to start when you don't know where to start, like that kind of clicked through yesterday.
Absolutely. It's an awesome light bulb moment. Really glad about that. And you're going to continue to see that theme follow through today. So we're going to start looking at a little bit of our design and say, well, we could build this design from scratch, but I wonder if Bootstrap has something to offer. So, we started with the Bootstrap grid system and using columns from that. Then we learned more about their utilities, right? Like Text Center and all of the Flex utilities, ways that we can use those classes, but still kind of build our own content from scratch. And then today or tomorrow, we're going to dive into using Bootstrap components, which are entirely designed items, like the nav bar and a card are the two that off the top of my head, and a button. That we're going to play around with and see, hey, we don't always have to create these HTML elements from scratch or these CSS stylings from scratch. We are able to dive into that as well. And so that is a important thing, right, of being able to read that documentation, because I can't make a lot of these Bootstrap components off the top of my head. I need to reference that documentation, and that's something that's going to continue through for the rest of the cohort. Practice reading documentation is certainly a skill, and what I mean by that, it's something that you can develop and get practice at, because oftentimes documentation is way more technical or way more in depth than what we need. And so being able to read through it, figure out what parts we need of it, and kind of combining that together so we get the code that we need is definitely something that with practice you will get a little bit better at. So we'll be referencing the documentation today and tomorrow, looking at different components, seeing how we can kind of combine them together. I don't want to call it quite a template, because a template tends to be a more fully designed website, but we're certainly using pieces of the Bootstrap framework in our own code in order to get something that may be a little bit more fully designed out for us. So that is something we are definitely getting into, but thank you for sharing that light bulb moment.
Can I ask a question, Max, that I didn't understand last time either?
Yeah.
What does it mean to build a website like through the WordPress, like WordPress elements? I know Jeff talked about it a lot, but I didn't really, I understand that there's WordPress and you can go to it and read stuff.
Yeah.
The building a website.
Great question.
Understand that.
Yeah, and WordPress is by far the dominant website building platform. You guys may know about like Wix and Squarespace. Those are becoming more popular, but WordPress, I believe the statistic, don't quote me on this, is WordPress powers between 60 and 70% of all websites you go to on the internet. Which is just crazy to think about. So WordPress is technically a framework. It's a category that it falls into is something called a CMS, or a content management system. And I'll give you a little backstory. So when I first started building websites, I was 14 and I went in my hometown. I just went down to Main Street and basically went to every business with a business card and a little brochure. And I said, hey, you need a website, right? Times are changing. People want to find you online. You want to get your hours out there. You need a website. And I built all of those websites in, I'm forgetting what there was a website creator built in iWeb or something like that, that was built into the Mac for the longest time. And Apple has since discontinued that. So I built all of these websites for all these different people. And then I published them out. They were on the internet. Everything was great. And I would get an email that says, oh, we changed our hours. Can you update the hours on the website? And I went, sure, no problem. I updated that. And then I started getting more and more emails from clients saying, hey, I want to add a whole new page to my website with this content. How do I do that? And I would say, well, I kind of have to do that for you, right? And then clients would go, oh, I need to put an emergency message up. This event is canceled. And it would take me 24 hours to get back to them because I was in high school and attending classes. And these business owners, I guess this was back when I was in middle school. Anyway, we're saying, well, I really want to be able to get in and edit my website. So I did that. I gave them edit access and they started going in and mucking up all the HTML, right? Because you guys know what the learning curve is and the div soup and what happens when you miss a closing div and how the whole site can break. And so I would start getting emails from clients going, well, I tried to do it on my own and now my site's really messed up. Can you go in and fix it for me? And so I thought there's got to be a better way to do this, right? There's got to be a better way to allow a client to be able to update the content on their website without necessarily breaking all the other coding, HTML, CSS elements that go with it. And that is why WordPress is so popular, because WordPress is a framework for developers that can go out and build an entire theme for their website. They can do all of the technical stuff and then have a separate admin interface for the end user, for your client, to be able to go through and update only the text on the website, essentially, without having to get nitty gritty in the HTML, the CSS, and do all of that. So WordPress is very, very popular. It started out as a blogging framework so that people could post blogs and not have to create a new HTML page every time they wanted to put some new content in, and has since grown to be by far the dominant content management system used. PHP is a full stack framework. In that it generates kind of your front end for you, but on the back end, it's using PHP, which is a server-side language under the hood, and MySQL, which is a different variant of Postgres, which we will be learning later on. Instead of teaching PHP, we teach Node.js, which is another server-side language. Node.js is a little bit newer than PHP, but PHP is a widely used server-side language. So we won't be doing a deep dive into a content management system. However, we will be learning different aspects of that, of how do we take some information that's in the database, make an API call, and have that show up on the front end, either using vanilla JavaScript, which is the module we're starting next, or using React, which is the module after JavaScript, to use that data and incorporate it in the page and display it. So yeah, WordPress, great framework, definitely something that you can say, all right, you know what, I'm coming out of here. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to build websites for clients. I'm going to dive into WordPress so that the client can update the website without having to touch any code. That is definitely a popular path that some of our students take after our program. And if you're thinking about, hey, I want to kind of start a dev shop, I want to be able to make websites for people and have them be able to update it themselves, WordPress is certainly a great area to go into. And a lot of the skills that you're learning here are directly transferable. You don't have to know how to write PHP code in order to build a WordPress website. But if you kind of level your way up and get into that like medium, kind of more custom WordPress sites, PHP is certainly a great language to learn. And all of the concepts that we will be learning in JavaScript, like loops and variables and arrays, all of that is directly transferable into what you would be learning in PHP, building a custom WordPress theme. Gagan, what's up?
Isn't the WordPress like pre-made blocks of code, like, like framework, like you don't have to do much, just add your info in there?
You can. So it's kind of, WordPress can be used at a bunch of different levels. You can certainly not have to write a line of code, pick a theme that you like in WordPress and be able to build your entire website with that theme without having to write a line of code. Then you get into kind of the more advanced levels of WordPress, where a client may already have a theme picked out, but they want a custom page made from scratch that may not be in a layout that the theme supports. And so that's kind of mid-level WordPress development. And then like the most advanced level of WordPress development would be building a theme from scratch. And that would certainly take not only PHP knowledge, but also WordPress knowledge to be able to dive into that and kind of create a website from scratch that is also compatible with WordPress. So your client can still update certain pieces of the website without having to dive into the code and do it from there. But yes, WordPress, I will throw out one word of warning in case you are interested. WordPress.com and WordPress.org are not the same things. So WordPress.com is going to probably charge you for hosting, or if you do their free tier, it locks you out of some of the WordPress features, but that's a great way to get up and running quickly. WordPress.org is an open source company that actually makes the framework that WordPress.com uses. The difference with WordPress.org, they're not going to charge a dime, but they are going to require you to set up your own hosting, and then that hosting will cost money. So going the WordPress.org route is just slightly more complicated because you have to set up your WordPress installation with a separate third-party host, but it is often cheaper to do that and gives you more features than WordPress.com can offer. So that's just a word of warning if you are interested in that. We recommend Medium if you're interested in blogging your journey throughout the bootcamp and eventually into your careers. But WordPress is a great alternative for that. That certainly gives you more control over the layout and the design of your website, which can be great for some people who want that level of control, but can be a real rabbit hole for other people of learning all the intricacies of WordPress when really all they want to be doing is writing a blog post and be able to get it out on the internet quickly. So just two things to caution you there. Squarespace is kind of a hybrid, WordPress is kind of a hybrid between Squarespace, which is solely website oriented, and Medium, which is solely blog oriented. There are a heck of a lot of people that use WordPress for building their website, even if that website doesn't include a blog. But WordPress technically got its roots and got started in making blog posts. Any other questions? Eva, did that answer your question? Okay. My biggest fear as a teacher is going on a 20-minute rant and then not answering the question you asked. Well, biggest fear of a teacher is showing up and, I'm in my underwear, but fortunately you guys can't see that part of my, I'm just kidding. All right, are we ready to dive in? Does anyone have any other questions, light bulb moments, code that's not working?
I cannot get my hold on.
Yeah. You're on mute, Corin, if you're talking to us.
Yeah, so I don't know. I can't get this off to the side for some reason.
So for that, we use a col6 on both the left and right side. So the need to reach me part should be in a col6, and then the form should be in its own col.
It's on
as
call
well.
6. Okay.
Yep.
That
And then
makes
the
more
other
sense.
thing to keep, just to watch out, let me request remote just to make sure I'm looking at the right spot.
Yeah.
This, come on. Okay, here's your other problem. This
Yeah.
form is not inside this row.
That did.
So
Okay,
take this
so-
closing div, which is closing the row, and move it down to after the form, and that should help get you going there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. So we're gonna get set up here. All the links have been moved into the outline. So if you are looking to pop open the site to reference or anything like that, all of the resources that we went over yesterday are in there. And if you have any questions, always feel free to message the TA, who is Caitlin, and she can either respond to your question or ask it on your behalf. So let's dive in. I'm going to go to my code. I'm going to go to my week 4. I'm going to select my day 2 portfolio, and I'm going to right click on that and go down to duplicate. Again, I'm doing this in Finder. I'm not doing this in VS Code. So I'm going to hit duplicate on that, and then I'm going to rename this day 3 portfolio, just so we can track our progress day over day in case you want to reference that to catch up. I'm going to take my day 3 portfolio, pop that open in VS Code. Once I get it in VS Code, I'm going to go ahead and hit my go live button and just make sure that my site where I left it is good to go with my name and the about section and all of that. Then I'm going to come back over to my code, pop open my index.html and my style.css, take my style.css, throw that down on the bottom. And a reminder for everyone, if you click on the little file explorer icon, that will hide your left sidebar in case you're trying to fit more on your screen. I am also going to start a live share and paste that into the chat and make sure you guys can access my local host as a shared server. And while you guys are joining the live share, I am going to grab my coffee and then we will dive in. Also going to pull up the live site to rebuild, so I have that to reference. Okay, join the live share. I'll be right back. You guys rolling in. Thank you. Anyone need help or another minute? Or a repeat of steps?
I am getting something funky when I try to go live.
Okay. Share screen.
Live is on the left, and then I'm in the middle. You're on the right.
You can start your screen share. Oh, there we go. It's coming in through now. Okay. That is, oh, okay. You've got something weird. I'm gonna request remote control. And I'm gonna open this. You created a folder called index.html and then put your 2 files inside of that. So if I do reveal in Finder here and go into the column view, you can see you've got your copy and then your index.html folder and then these files inside of it. So what I'm gonna do, I don't know if it's gonna let me move these out. So I'm just gonna move these temporarily out to this folder, delete this folder, and then move these 2 back inside of it. And so if we close this and close this and close this, now when we stop it and go live, you're back in business. So you just had that extra index.html folder that was confusing VS Code. Anyone else need help? Rather help you now than have you lost all the class and not able to follow along. Okay. So I'm looking at my site and I'm comparing it to what we've built so far. And I'm feeling pretty good about this section. And I click on my arrow and it takes me down to my little about section. And I'm feeling good about that. And so I come back to my site and I'm going, all right, now I got to get into this contact section. So I'm going to go battle my div soup, which is a little bit easier because now it is section soup, not div soup. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right, this is one section of my site. This is the whole arrow part. Then I'm coming down and I'm looking at my next section, and that's going to be my about. And so I want to create a whole new section called contact. So I'm going to put my cursor at the right spot after my closing section. And if I wanted to, I could click on this div here and scroll back up and see that this is for my container. So I must be in the right spot because I want to be after my last section, but still inside this div. And just a reminder for everyone, just because this may or may not be a quiz question, why did we use a container instead of a container fluid? Well, if we use the container, that's going to draw the bounds, especially on a wider screen, so that the content of the screen doesn't get any wider than this. So if I were to use a container fluid, my bound wouldn't be here. It would push it over to the edge of the screen and kind of be, no matter how big that screen got, it would keep on going to the edge. Compared to the container, which is going to say, hey, we won't get any bigger than this. The primary use of using a container is it's actually really hard for our eyes to hit here and go all the way back over to here. So what the container is doing is making our eye travel a little less long. Instead of going from the very edge of the screen all the way over down to the next line, what it's doing is making it so when we hit the last line, our eyes have less distance to go back to the next line. Believe it or not, that goes back to newsprint, newspaper days. And they did a bunch of studies and they actually found out that your eyes got tired out more when the columns got too wide on the newspaper. So if you ever read a newspaper, you'll notice that the text is multiple columns. That's actually making your eyes travel less distance overall. Kind of a weird throwback. Another term that you may hear is something called above the fold or below the fold. That also came from newspaper days, right? Where anything, when they took a newspaper and they folded it in half, anything that was on the top half of it was considered above the fold. That's what the headlines were going to be that people read. Whatever the priorities were that were below the fold, in other words, if you unfolded the paper, chances are people wouldn't read quite as much there. That also plays into website design. So this top half of the page is what we would consider above the fold. And anything that required the user to scroll down to read more of it would be below the fold. So something to think about when you're designing your websites is what's going to be visible when it first loads compared to what do people have to scroll down to read. If they have to scroll down to read it, that's considered below the fold. Yes, newspaper continues to this day to impact design. And to tie it back all the way, WordPress's editor is actually called Gutenberg after the Gutenberg press. So when you're working in WordPress and actually writing text, that is in the Gutenberg text editor, which was recently rebuilt in React, which we will be learning in a couple weeks. Okay, I want my new section in here. I've delayed enough. I'm going to put my section in. Chances are I know I'm going to have to style this. So right out off the bat, I'm going to put my ID in there for the contact form section. And I'm going to mirror my design up here. So I've got an H1 here. I probably need an H1 here for my contact. So I save that. I come back over to my design and that doesn't look good. So I'm going to narrow in on the kind of the design for that entire section. So I've got a lighter blue color there. And my font color is in white. So that's what I'm going to target. I'm going to go to my CSS. I'm going to go down to the about, and underneath my about, I'm going to do an intro. Now, the order of CSS can matter because styles at the bottom will cascade over styles at the top. However, because this is so specific, it is okay to put this anywhere. I try to arrange my CSS in the order of the more generic elements that are going to apply across the site up at the top. And then towards the bottom, I go in the order that they show up in my page. So I could take this intro and put it all the way up at this contact. I don't know why I said intro. It should be contact, my bad. I could put that contact pretty much anywhere in my CSS and it would do the exact same thing. But we want to think about code maintainability, right? When we come back to this project in 6 months and want to go update it, finding that in our CSS, we're going to kind of thank ourselves retroactively for organizing it in the same order it is in the site, just to make it a little bit easier to find things. So I'm going to go to my contact section. And I'm going to set my background to a specific shade of blue that I already have picked out. If you're using your own color palette, you are welcome to do that. If you are using my color palette, go to the live share, just go ahead and copy that hex code and use that. I am also going to set my font color to white. And I also want 30 pixels of padding on my content as well. So I save that, I come back over to my live site, I scroll down, and now I've got my word contact showing up in the right spot, and I am ready to continue working on that. Anyone need help or not have their contacts section feeling like the styling's coming together?
I've got a fail to save style CSS, unable to write file.
Cancel and try it again.
No, it keeps giving it to me.
Try closing that whole window and reopening the folder. And if that isn't working, then you can share your screen.
It's telling me it's unable to read the file. I mean, the
Weird.
HTML is fine, but the style CSS is weird.
Share your screen. Let's take a look. I've never gotten a unable to read file. Okay, let's try this. I'm gonna copy all of this just so we have a copy of it and close it and then reopen it from here. And everything's still the same. This might be an old error. So I'm going to close it and just try and make this like blue to see if it's working. When I save, it does show up in blue. So I think that was just an old error that was hanging around. And you should be good to go from here on out.
Thank you.
VS Code is kind of weird. Sometimes it clears the errors for you and sometimes it doesn't. Anyone else need help? Okay. So now I'm going to go back into my contact form, and it may be tempting to just go dive in and put this text in here. But before I do that, I'm going to think through my design a little bit just with my lines, because what I'm realizing is this starts here and it's a 50% split down the screen. So if I drag this over, I'm realizing I've got two separate boxes that I'm working with there. That to me is screaming grid system. So before I get anything added in here content-wise, I want to make sure that I'm set up for the grid. But I can't use a column here or here until I put a div in of what class. My row. You got it, Allie. So I'm going to come back over to my contact section. I'm going to put in my div class row. And if you want to use that shortcut, you can do a period and then type in ROW and hit enter. That's going to automatically generate out that div for you. That is the Emmet way of auto generating it. Exact same way, if you want to type it out, you'll see that I use those two interchangeably. Okay, so now I'm going to get in here and I could make both of these a col 6 if I wanted to. Or I could just make this a col and this a col, and they would evenly split so that the two are sharing the 50% area. I'm a little old school. I like assigning the number to it because that gives me more flexibility down the road and lets me make sure everything's adding up to 12 without something sneaking by me. So I'm going to come inside my row and I'm going to do my col 6. And inside of that, I'm just going to do a p tag that says want to get in touch. Shoot me an email or fill out the form. So I save that. I come back over to my my live site and I've got my p tag in here and I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now I've got to figure out, hey, where is this form going? This is in another column. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to add in a comment that says end of contact text. Then I'm going to make sure I'm inside my row still, which I am. And because of that, I'm going to do my div class col 6 as well. And I'm just going to say form goes here. When I save that and come back over here, my form goes here is in the right spot. So I am feeling pretty good about that. Guys, a hot minute to catch up there. Natasha, what's up?
Okay, I noticed that you did not have more than just the one row, but how does the computer know which side? Because they're both col 6. So is it the first one will go on the left automatically?
Yes.
Okay.
The col 6 doesn't have anything to do with where it's going to go. It's just the sizing of it.
Yeah, I know
So-
that. Just like, how did it know to go in that call 6 and not the other one?
Because it's reading it top
Left to
down.
right. Okay.
So this call 6 is saying, okay, whatever goes inside of it until I hit this closing div is all going to show up inside of this area right here. And then it hits that closing div and it goes, okay, whatever else is coming is not going to go in here. It hits a new call 6 and goes, okay, I'm going to make this box. Then it puts the form goes here and whatever else in it, and it hits that closing div and goes, okay, now whatever else is coming after that is going to go underneath these 2 columns instead of inside of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone need a minute? Okay. So now I've got to dive into my form design. So I'm coming back over to my site and I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, the email and the go ahead I'm listening should be pretty easy, but shoot, man, I got a left and a right here. So I could get involved with something called floating it to the left and floating it to the right. But we already know how to tackle this with the grid system. We might as well use that. So there's nothing saying that I can't put a row inside a col, which is inside another row. However, I can't just use another column. I have to put that row in to reset it so it knows, hey, that's a new 12 space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a form tag for the first time. That may be coming out of your Code Academy or your free code camp that you may have gone through. If you haven't gone through it, that's okay. Form tag is just setting it up so that when we hit the send button, it makes it easier for us to capture all of that information. Then I'm going to put my div class row in. And inside my row, I'm going to make a call and I'm going to use an input. And that input is going to be a type of text. Lots of different inputs that we can use. We can use number inputs. We can use email inputs. We can use time inputs. But for now, we're just going to do an input type text. And then I can add another HTML attribute to that. That is going to be something called a placeholder. And I'm going to say first name. So I save that. I come back over to my site. And now I've got my first name showing up. Doesn't look quite the way that I want it to, but that's okay. We can clean that up. I'm going to also put in my last name before I do any of my styling on that. So I go back into this and I have a little bit of div soup going on. This is my column for my first name input. So I'm going to add a note in here that says, oops, end of first name col. That must mean that this div is closing my row. Now, where do I want last name to show up? I don't want it to be down here in a new row. I want it to be up here in the same row that first name is in. So that must mean that I'm going to come down here. I'm still inside my div class row because I'm indented a level over. So I'm going to do another call in here. And I'm going to take the same exact input and paste it down here and just change my first name to my last name. So I save that. I head back over. Well, what the heck, man? I got my 2 columns. Well, that's weird. If I drag this out, oh, that's not what I want. If I drag this back in, it doesn't have enough room to put my last name up on this line. Well, if I'm looking at my design, it has plenty of room. It's almost like we need to tell it, hey, this input should be the same width as the column it's in. So in order to target that, I'm going to target my form tag. And inside of my form, I'm going to target the input and make the input a width of 100%. In other words, just use the same width that the column you're in is. And now you see my first name and my last name show up. And if I go really teeny tiny, I still have that. And if I drag it all the way out, I still have my first name and my last name showing as is. While I'm in here, I might as well make this design match this design. I notice that there's a little bit more breathing room all the way around, but that breathing room is inside, right? It's making my background area for that input a little bit bigger. Because it's inside, it must be padding. So I'll add a little bit of padding to that. And now I've got my inputs looking the way that I want them to. A lot of code that we just wrote there. Take a minute because now look at how deep we are. Think back to week 2. There's no way you guys would have been able to conquer all of these closing tags. But now, as long as we're staying up with it and getting our cursor in the right spot before we make a new tag, hopefully this is making a little bit more sense. Yeah, we've got a ton of closing tags down here, but look at the design that we're able to pull off and even nest our grid system multiple levels deep. Anyone need a minute or have a question before we move on?
I have a question. Can you just put up your like your example of what you just did?
This one?
Okay, so mine is not coming on the sides. I'm trying to figure out why, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have your form input with 100%?
oh nope.
And Shannon, no problem. I'll give you a minute. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 levels deep. Maybe let's clean some of this out while we're waiting. I'm going to click on this div. This is the end of first row of form. This is end of contact form. This closing div is the end of my end of call for form. This div is closing out my end of row for contact, text, and form. And then this is the end of my contact section. This is finally end of container. And when I save all of those, it's going to wrap it down onto the next line, which isn't a problem as long as we know this is talking about this line up here. Shannon, what's up?
So I'm wondering because I have, Freer on, and sometimes it'll make things different than yours. It'll break the paragraphs up, so my lines aren't the same. Is there a way to adjust that?
I would, I don't know what's making it different. Is there a certain example that you can look at and see, like line number 39 is different?
So right now, so I was trying to look at 51, and you've got, you know, the closing key tag. I have div class call 6 above the form opening tag.
So is your P tag 49 and 50, or is it all on one line?
Okay, so my opening key tag starts at 48 and my closing tag is on 51. Is that what
Okay.
you were asking?
Share your screen so I can just compare them.
Okay.
I will say that comparing line number to line number, while it's a good tactic in the beginning, doesn't hold up throughout the rest of the course. Yeah, so one thing that I'm noticing is that like your P tag, see, it's all on one line here, but on mine, it broke it up into multiple.
Let's look at yours.
That's what I think the problem is. But the other thing that I'm noticing, you're prettier broke.
I did notice that right before I asked.
Mine just did the same thing.
So, is your prettier broken?
It kept going off and then coming back on, but it was being weird for a minute there. I think it was because I pissed it off and didn't put a div, a closing div in the call 6.
That will do it. So, let's see if we can find what's going on, Shannon, because 9 times out of 10, when you get prettier fixed, it will like automatically fix these for you. So it's lining up with what mine is. So let's work on this, because I notice you've got a div col 6 here and then your form, but notice your form isn't indented, and it should be, because it's inside this col 6. So that to me signals to me, hey, we've got the closing div here, but this col 6 is inside this row. And this row, if I click on that div, has no matching closing tag down here. So what I'm going to guess is that you're missing a closing div. And if I save that, now your prettier is back up and running. Now that did not fix the problem with this being on multiple lines. And that I'm going to have to dive into to figure out why your prettier settings are not wrapping onto multiple lines and mine are.
Okay.
Danny, I'm not sure if that helped you with the closing tags. Match your closing tag, see if that helps you. And if it doesn't, raise your hand. And Sequota, you can share your screen, and then Danny, I'll circle back to you if you need it. Okay, so we are
Indentation though, like fucks a oh.
So you're prettier. Let me request remote. And your prettier appears to be working. So are you having an issue in the browser?
So it's still not, like, it's still over here. Should I try?
Let's take a look and debug. So we've got our row, and we've got one col 6 in a div, and we've got another col 6 in a divvy.
Oh.
So if I take that E out, you are all caught up.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Danny, did you still need a hand, or did you get caught up?
I'm all caught up. I'm just very confused. Like, I noticed that my prettier only has 1 check, and then sometimes we'll have 2 checks, and I just don't understand. And it doesn't break mine up like yours does. Like, I'm not trying to compare lines, but I notice mine doesn't break up the same as yours. So I just don't understand why.
Yeah, neither do I, and that's something that I need to dive into. I also don't know the difference between
Yeah, I
one
didn't
check
understand
and
if there was
two.
a difference why. Yeah. So I was just like, maybe that was the issue. So I was just gonna see if that was it. So that's pretty much my only question is I just don't understand why it doesn't break up like yours does.
There's
That's pretty much it.
something in my settings that I've adjusted and forgot that I've adjusted. And I think it is, so Prettier has a ton of options that are built into it, where you can be like, oh, I want my lines of code to only be like 120 characters long instead of 140. And I'm guessing that there's something in there that I've adjusted on mine that is different than the default settings that you guys have, which is why mine are wrapping down sooner than yours are. So I'm going to have to look that up. I'm also going to have to look up the single check versus the double check because I've noticed that, but I've used Prettier for years and I never have looked up what a single check or double check means. So a single or a double is fine. It's not you, it's me. Let me put it like that.
I just wanted to make sure. I was like, did I break something? And I didn't even know how I could have because it's still working, but I just didn't understand why I was doing my breakup different.
You can pat yourself on the back for a single or a double check. It's just the X that we get worried about.
Okay, thank you so much, Max.
Yep. Goggin, what's up?
So, my boxes are uneven for some reason. The div container.
You mean the inputs or the divs?
No, the divs outside. Let me show you. I'll show
Yeah,
you.
go for it.
Okay. So you see right here, like I have to center the arrow too, but I didn't do it. This one right here, you see, like this is bigger than.
Did you put margin on the about section?
Nope.
I'm curious. Comment out line 52 and see what happens.
Oh, 52, this one?
Yeah. Okay. You can put that back in. And then I'm going to request remote. I am worried that it's going to be. No, because they're doing the display flex inside of it. So that shouldn't affect the parent container. Let me take a look. So you close your section here. So the row has some margin and padding built into it. I'm curious if I throw a row in up here. That makes it the same.
Oh,
so the difference on mine is that I do the row inside of it instead of applying the class to the section because I don't like having something outside of it and then opening another column inside of it. So if you look at mine, my H1 tag or my H1 tag is between the section and where I start the row for the columns. So I try to not have any children element in a row other than columns.
Okay.
You don't have to do that. Obviously, yours is working fine, but I find a good rule of thumb is to not have any children element in a row that are not a column.
Oh, so you just like put a row and then you put a column right away.
Yeah, so I don't have the row here. What I do is I take the row off and then I put a row in here and then have my columns inside of that.
Okay, got it.
But I'm going to put it back the way it is only because yours is working. But like what I did down here is I only have columns inside my row.
Oh, got it.
So that's what I try to follow, but it's not the end of the world if you don't.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, well, Danny, that's an even more annoying answer because my file is fine according to me, and I only have a single check. So I'm sure your answer is right, but I'm not getting a double check, and I swear to God my file is fine. So and I love that the official documentation is like, it's fine. You don't need to know what fine is. It's just fine. Just leave it there, okay? So I will see if I can get a definition of what fine is, maybe during the break, or maybe I'll bring that to class tomorrow, or maybe I'll just bring a glass of whiskey and say that I couldn't figure out what fine was. One check, two checks, doesn't matter as long as you got checks and not red.
I have a question,
Yeah.
I guess. All right. I have everything pretty much working except for, and it seems like a small thing, but I can't get the spacing on the sides of like the about and the contact
Okay.
area. But I feel like I'm not seeing where it is, and I feel like it's probably a stupid little thing, but
Do you have padding on your contact section in your CSS?
I do. Padding
Okay.
30.
Yep, share
Wait,
screen. Let's
hang
take a
on,
look.
that's-
Usually it's like a
Okay.
closing div that's causing the problem.
What do you want to see? The code or the
Showing this entire model.
Yeah. Doing desktop
Okay.
1 or desktop 2 is usually the most helpful for me, just in case we have to switch to the browser. Okay, so you've got your contact. Let me request remote.
right? Same.
Okay. Caitlin, can you copy and paste the live share link back into the chat for Mo?
Yes.
I also haven't labeled the div soup yet, as you can see.
Um,
I'll get there.
well, what's even more fun is that you don't have a prettier down at the bottom. So I have no idea if prettier is mad at you or not.
I don't know because I thought I enabled it and then it kind of went away. So
is it
I
running?
didn't hate it. I wouldn't mind if
Oh,
it
no.
appeared again. I don't know. It's downloaded.
Okay. It is. So if I just enable that, I don't know how you disabled it, but that's okay. We're also going to check your
Okay.
settings because there are two things we want to turn on. One is the default formatter.
Which I thought I did.
You did. And then the other one
Okay.
is format on save, which is probably also on. Yes, it is. Okay, so somehow your extension just got disabled, which is no big deal. Now when I save it, your prettier runs. So yay for you because you stayed on top of your div soup.
Oh.
Now I want to
Also,
check.
but now why does my spacing look all like compacted in?
Because prettier is running that for you.
Okay, but yours doesn't look like that.
No, because I got my tab width set to 4 instead of 2, I believe. So if I adjust the tab width to 4
That's
and save it, when I come over here, go away. Up here. There we go. And save it again. Now, does that match mine? That looks like it matches mine. Okay, so good note for everyone. Brandy, thank you for setting an example. If you like my indentation, if you think that this is easier to read than the prettier default. Oh, and this also fixes the wrapping question that you had, Shannon, of why aren't the lines lining up. So the way you fix that is hit Command and minus to open up the settings in your window, not in the live share, but in your window. Come up to the search settings at the top and do a search for tab width. And then down here where it says prettier tab width, adjust this from 2 to 4, and it will match the same spacing that I have in my files. So I'm going to close that. Now everything's lining up there. Okay, so I do want to see what's going on in your browser. Is that over? Is that on?
That is over.
Yeah, I'll let you do it.
There it is.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about what you're not getting is like this area right in here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That is coming from my container. So let me go back to your code, maybe. Can you take me back to your code?
Yeah. I do, because I'm terrible at getting rid of my extra. I've got a stupid amount of desktop. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. And we somehow opened
Max
up
over
to
here exposing all of my open
indexes.
windows.
Okay. So what I have in mind is.
Oh,
come on,
sorry.
oh, you're fine. This whole div, you put it in, but you forgot to put the container on it. Container. Did I spell that right? Yeah, I think I did. So switch back to your browser and see if that fixes it.
Yeah, it looks
did?
big, but yeah.
Cool. Then you should be all set and good to go. And I might have mine zoomed in a little bit more, but it looks like you're good.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks.
No problem. Eva, what's up?
Never mind, I answered it already.
Cool. Anyone else need help?
Oh, I need to mute my.
So quota, what we did is in your VS Code, in your window, not in my window, hit Command minus to open the settings. I'm sorry, Command comma, not Command minus. And then do a search for tab width and adjust your prettier tab width from 2 to 4. And that's going to make it indented a little bit more, but that will make your line numbers line up with my line numbers. I am a little weird. I like my tab width on HTML set to 4, but my tab width on JavaScript files set to 2. And that's something that Prettier allows you to adjust like between file formats. But I do like my tab width set to 4. Natasha, what's up?
Mine's not letting me save. It's asking me to sign into something to be able to save it. The settings for tab width.
Share your screen.
Okay. This one.
Okay, so you don't have to turn on settings syncs. It automatically saves when you just adjust the number there. So you can just close out of settings and that will be saved on yeah, up there, and that will be saved automatically.
All righty. Crisis avoided. Thank you.
No problem. Interesting, Jen. I did notice a little bit of a lag on some of your internet connections tonight. So I would not be surprised if like Spectrum was having network-wide issues and it's been cascading failures. And I fortunately am not on Spectrum, so that's probably why I am not having issues. Spectrum is about as bad as it comes up here, but sometimes you have no options because yay monopolies. Oh, interesting. Then I've got no idea. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Anyone else need help or have a question?
I noticed that when you were doing, when the last person was sharing and you were editing the code, when you were editing it, the prettier went to 2 check marks, and when it saved, it went to 1. So I guess it's fine. Fine what is written, and then double fine when it's saved.
I was playing around with that. Like if I make an edit to the file, it stays at 2, but then when I hit save, it goes back to 1. And if I save it again, it doesn't do anything. But then if I hit, like, I don't know. I really am confused, prettier. Like, what is fine to you? Give me my double check mark back. I'm just annoyed. Okay, so we've got our inputs in, and the good news is a lot of our inputs we can keep rolling with. So I'm gonna hopefully conquer my div soup here. This is my row for this big outside with my 2 col 6s. I still want to be inside my form. So I'm going to go down and find my closing form tag. And then I'm going to figure out what my next input is going to be. That's my email input. So I'm going to be inside of my form, but outside my closing div for that row. And I should be able to just put my input type in of email and my placeholder in of email address. And if I save that and take a look, I get my email address showing up. So I get my email in there. I don't love, though, that the email is right on top of my first name and my last name. So to fix that, I'm going to throw in an ID on this of email, target my email, and put a little margin on the top of maybe, let's try 15 pixels. And while I'm at it, on the bottom of 15 pixels as well. And that just gives me a little bit of breathing room, and I'm feeling good about that. We might as well keep our momentum going. I'm going to take a look, and I've got this input, but you notice this input's a little bit bigger. And I also have the ability to kind of resize this in here, which is nice if I needed a longer one. So instead of using an input, I'm actually going to use a text area. And I can still use the same attribute called placeholder of like, enter your text here. And text areas are a little weird in that we shouldn't use a self-closing tag on the text area like we can use on the input. For whatever reason, some browsers don't like self-closing text areas. And so it is better to not use the self-closing tag and to use the text area closing. So I'm going to go take a look, and now I'm like, well, that kind of looks right, but why doesn't it have the nice padding going on, and why isn't it a width of 100%? Well, if I take a look at my input that I targeted in my CSS, I targeted a form input. Well, here's my form, and I targeted the input, which is first name, last name, and email address, but text area isn't an input. It's a different kind of HTML element. So the other thing that we need to do is throw a comment in here and say, hey, also in the form, you should apply this styling to a text area as well. So I save that, I come back over here and I've got enter your text here, and I'm feeling good about that. Again, we not only added our text area, we went into our CSS and added in another selector for our CSS to apply the same styling to a form text area that we applied to a form input. All right. So let's wrap this up before we go on break. I've got my send button in here, but something kind of interesting is happening. When I hover over that, I get a nice little effect going on there. Well, this button doesn't look too hard to build, right? We could build this. We could do a width 100. We could put our background color in. We could set our text color. We could write a hover. But that seems like a lot of freaking CSS to write, and I am a lazy mofo. So what I'm going to do is head over to Bootstrap. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com, and you don't have to follow along with me here. We're not taking a ton of code from this. But I'm going to go to the docs, and I'm going to scroll down on the left side here to my components. And inside these components, these are all things that are built into Bootstrap that we can use without having to write any CSS. So I'm going to head to their button area, and I'm going to see that they've got all of these different variants. Well, this primary variant is the one that looks closest to what I'm going for. So I'm going to take this whole line of HTML and copy it, head back over to my CSS, and just paste that in as the last element in my form. I save, I head back over to my site, and I've got this showing up. Now I've only got two things I want to style in that. One, I want to change the primary to say something like send, and I can even use emoji in there. That's my control command space, and I'll put a little icon in there, a little emoji in there. Now I've got my send. The only other thing is this button is teeny tiny, and I want it to span the full width. So all I need to do is target my form again in my CSS, go find that BTN class. That's right here. And on that, set a width of 100%. So I save that. That's looking really good. The only thing that I don't like is that we've got even spacing here, and not even spacing here. So as a designer, I'm going to add in some margin to the top of 15 pixels. I scroll down, that's nicely sized out. The last thing I'm going to do is this blue doesn't match any of the other blues on my site. And if I make it this color blue, it's going to blend right into the background. And that's not the effect that I'm going for. So I'm actually going to reuse this color blue, that darker blue, as my styling. So I'm going to I'm actually going to target the BTN primary on this because the primary is what's controlling the background color. I'm going to target my background color and drop in that deeper color blue. Now I've got my send, and when I hover over it, I get that nice effect. So if you've got your contact all finished up, you can go on break, be back at 7:20, and we will keep going from there. If you're still working on it, I'll stick around for the next couple minutes in case you have a question.
So why can't we add the class to the form? Like, if you just put a comment, just add a button on there, form, because then it just evens out there kind of.
What do you mean?
So you know how we put the input text area in the form section in CSS, right there, up right there. Why can't we just put a comma and button so the width is 100%?
Because that would apply padding, and I don't want the padding on it
Oh wait,
because I use margin instead of padding.
okay, got it.
We could if the only thing was width 100%. And there's a lot of people will just make a class called full width and apply that. And there's also something, I think if you do a deflex, it will pull it into full width. Let me see if it's in the documentation. Disabled link block buttons. So if you put a D grid on the parent form, it will automatically make all of the buttons be full width, be a block element instead. But I like teaching it this way of a width 100%. It's just going to push it out.
That's fine. I just wanted to see what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
All right. And how can you go up on your CSS? I wanted to see how do you apply the margin to the other,
To the button?
no,
Or
to
the up here?
Oh, you just target. Okay, I got it.
I target just the email.
All right.
And this is the final look that we're going for. You got this working, you can head on break. I will stick around for the next couple minutes, be back by 7:20. Start a break a couple minutes early, so we'll be back a couple minutes early tonight.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
I still have like a bright blue border around the send button. I'm trying to do border, it's not.
When it's that, it's gonna be your outline. So if you set outline to none, that should fix
To
your
none.
border issue.
What if I want to change it to a different color? Because like I tried putting it white instead of none, just so there was like a little bit of an outline to it, and it's still not. It's still blue.
That's a good question. Outline dash color.
I tried that one too.
Then it might be an issue.
Even if I put none outline none on there, it's still a bright blue outline.
Indeed it is. Let's try this. Let me target. What if we do an outline and a border?
There you go.
So, but if I take this and apply it here and take this out, I'm just curious. Okay, so it is a border and not the outline.
Okay.
Yeah. So just target the border instead of the outline, and that should do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Danny, what's up?
I don't understand why I don't have words for my email. Can I share my screen?
You sure can.
And this is what it looks like right now.
Okay, so you're asking why you don't have the placeholder in your text area?
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure I just don't understand where I'm missing something.
Neither do I. Let me just take a look and make sure you're closing. Yeah. Closing. Okay, so believe it or not, I think the issue is that this needs to be up on the same line. See how that closing arrow kind of came down for you?
Yeah.
Now, if we slide over,
Oh, there
your
it
text
is.
shows up. So to give you a better explanation of what's happening there is if you put like text in here and save it and go back, you'll notice it has like the word text in here. And if you can edit any of that, but if you delete it out completely, it brings back the placeholder text. What was happening was you actually had basically the equivalent of just a space right here. And because there was something in there, it wasn't showing the placeholder. It was literally just showing that space character. So by taking that out, Prettier is now doing the right thing by taking that closing arrow and putting it on the same line. So there's nothing between it. And that's what's bringing the placeholder back.
Okay. Thank you, Max.
Yep. Shay, what's up?
No, I'm gonna share my screen to better explain it, but for some reason the boxes are stretched all the way out on the section and not compact. It's better to show you that. Hang on.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, so let me take a look at your code. Let me request remote. So I'm going to go all the way up to your, so you've got a container, you've got 2 containers, and we normally only use 1 container per website. And so I think that's starting some problems for you. So I'm going to go all the way up to your first container.
I think in his contact form, he's got padding only on the bottom.
That could have something to do with it as well. So I'm going to take this div out, which is effectively going to, let me just make sure this div is for your container. So I'm going to take that closing div out as well. And that will effectively make everything be in one big container instead. So I'm going to save that and make sure that didn't break anything. Sorry, your screen share is lagging a little bit. Come on, there we go. Okay, so that didn't fix the problem, but that is closer to my code. Then we're going to look at your section and your contact. And you've got padding on the bottom compared to me that has padding all around it. And I did 20, but you've got 30 in your about section. So we'll match the 30. And just like that, you're all caught up. Good catch.
Thank you.
You beat me to it. Anyone else need help? Okay, I'll see you guys at 7:20. Welcome back, everyone. All right, we're going to dive back on in here. Get your cameras on when you get a second. So before we wrap up the contact section, there's one other thing that I've got on my live site that we don't have in our version. And it's the ability to click on email. And if I click on email, you notice it pops open my mail application. That's a special tag that we can use to make an email a link. So in order to pull that off, I've got the text, shoot me an email. So I want to find that in my HTML. So I'm going to look and I've got shoot me an email right here. And I want to make the word email a link. So in order to do that, we use our A tag and we put our A tag or the word email right into our A tag. And we still use an href. But instead of just putting in my email address here, the browser doesn't know that what I'm putting in is an email, although it should. So in order to preface this, in order to tell it, hey, I'm putting in an email here, if someone clicks on this link, it should open up the mail program, I preface it with something called mail to and a colon. So when I save that and go test it on my website, you see I've got email showing up. If I click on that, it pops open the mail application. Unfortunately, it won't pop open Gmail unless you've got that configured, but that is a good way to get that configured. The only thing that I don't like is now my word email is a blue link. So in order to fix that, I'm going to go find my contact section. And right underneath it, I'm going to say, hey, in the contact section, go find any A tags and make the color of them white. And so I save, I come down here and I've got my email in here and I'm good to go. So I added my A tag. I have the word email inside of it before I close the tag. I add in my mail to with a colon because it's an email address. I put in my email address there, and then I added into my CSS a contact A tag that's turning that blue back to a white. Anyone need help getting that link in or need a minute to catch up?
Can you just go over how you did the turning the email back white?
Yep. In my CSS, I targeted the contact section because we already had an ID on it. And then I targeted an A tag and said any A tags in the contact section make the color of them white. All right, so finish up this last section I've got on my final area here is my portfolio. Then if we have time, we'll go through getting this animation to work with CSS animations and keyframes. So to finish this up, I've got a new section in the portfolio. That's what I want to dive into. So I am going to figure out where my last section ends, which is all the way down here. I still want to be inside my container. So I'm going to do a new section. I'm going to do my ID of portfolio on that. And I don't like to leave any empty HTML elements when I create them. So I always throw something in there. For this, I'm going to put in my portfolio. So I save, I come over, I look, and I've got my portfolio. This time I actually want the black text. I just need to put in my background. So I'm going to head to my CSS. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. I'm going to target my portfolio ID, and I'm going to add in a background color. I'm going to go grab my hex color and drop that in. And I'm also going to add my padding of 30 pixels onto it like I've added for all of my other sections. So I save that, I pop over here, and I've got my Word portfolio all set up and ready to start dropping in some content. New section ID, target the ID in my CSS selector, add in the background, add in my padding, and we are good to start building out some content. All right, so I head back over to what I'm trying to recreate. I've got a line of text here. To view more details about any of the projects, click on the cards. No problem, I can drop that in. I'm gonna do my P tag, say to view more details about the project, click on any of the cards. Go make sure that's showing up. That's in the right place. All of that's looking good. So the last thing I need to do is get my 3 projects to show up here. We haven't done this 30-second feedback form, but we're going to just pretend. So we've got three projects we can put in here. If we wanted to, we could use the new site instead. I'm just going to do this feedback form because I've got the image for it already. But I'm going to work on that. And what's the first thing I notice before I put any of these in? I've got content going across the screen. That must mean that I'm going to have a row here. And in that row, it looks like I'm going to have 3 columns. So that's what I'm going to target. I'm going to say, all right, inside my section, outside the P tag, I'm going to put in my row. And I'm going to have 3 columns. I'm going to start with my first col 3 and work from there. I'll load up the other columns once I've got my first one built out. To make sure this is showing up right, I'm going to just put project number 1 here, save it, come back over to my code, and project number 1 is showing up in the right spot of where I want it to be. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, I've got my image showing up here, and I've got this thing underneath it with smaller text and then a button. And I could build this out, right? I could put my image in and I could round those borders off a little bit and I could build all of this out. But this looks like a common design. This is actually called a card. And so if we head back over to Bootstrap and go to the card in the components section and scroll down, this is a perfect example of what we're trying to build. So I'm going to come all the way down here and I'm going to hit the copy to clipboard icon here. If it is easier to grab this from my code, that is totally fine. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back over. I want this to be inside my card. So I'm sorry, inside my column. So inside my col 3, I'm going to paste that in and hit save, head back over to my code, and oof. Okay, that's not exactly what I was going for, but most of it is looking right. So the first thing I notice is that I've got a broken image here. In order to fix that, I already have an image uploaded that you guys can use. So I'm going to copy that and paste that into the chat so you can use my link. Of course, you are welcome to generate your own screenshots later and load them into your portfolio. So I'm going to take that URL and replace that in my SRC tag, where there are these 3 dots. I'm going to paste that link in. Is my first one Netflix? No, my first one isn't Netflix. My first one is weather app. So I'm going to share that and paste that in. And Caitlin, can you grab the live share link for Sierra?
Yep, my chat is not refreshing as fast as yours, I don't think.
Oh, everyone's getting internet problems. Yay. Zoom also sometimes doesn't scroll down for you, so you have to like scroll down even though they're new messages.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Okay, so I put my link in, I hit save, and now we have my image showing up. So I'm feeling good about that. The other thing is, for accessibility reasons, all images are supposed to have an alt tag on them. That's so if a screen reader goes through the website, there's something for the screen reader to read out to describe what we're looking at. So I'm going to put in here screenshot of weather app, right? Basically something to describe it. So if someone is hard of sight, the screen reader would describe to them an alternative, which is what alt stands for, description of what that image is. So this is something that I haven't taught before. It is really good practice to put that alt tag in there just to make your site a little bit more accessible. So I save that. I come back over here and we're feeling pretty good about this, right? All of this is looking pretty similar to what my final design is that I'm going for. So I'm just going to go through here and clean some of this up. The card title, I want to say weather app. And then the description that I have in is first front end project modeled after a weather app. Great. First front end project modeled after a weather app. And then I got a little crafty and I said, instead of go somewhere, I said, make it rain. Save that, come back over, take a look. And there is my first Bootstrap component. Okay, technically second because we used the button before, but a good example of how we can use a pre-built component by using the documentation that Bootstrap provides to have a fully made component without us having to take a deep dive on it. So I'm going to stop there and poll because that was a lot of HTML to write, and I want to give everyone plenty of time to get caught up. So
where is the screenshot for the weather app?
I put a link to the I put a link in the chat that you can just copy and paste that PNG link right in at 7:30 in the chat. Danny, what's up?
I'm broken and I don't know why or what I did wrong. Can I share screen?
Sure, go for it.
Yo.
Okay. My guess is you're missing a closing div. So to test that, what I like to do is I notice the indentation starts to get funky right around here. So what I do is I come down here and I do my opening tag in a slash, and it will autocomplete in whatever it thinks is missing. And then if I save that, no, it didn't fix it. So we got to do it manually. Sometimes I like to just try that and see if I get lucky. Okay, so we got the closing div on our card body. Then we've got the closing div on our card, which means we need a closing div on the col and a closing div on the row. So I think we're actually on the right track. I think you actually need two of them. And just like that, Prettier is fixed and you are caught back up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Max.
No problem. Give you guys a chance to vote in here or catch up on the code. I know that was a lot of code, but keep in mind that Bootstrap wrote most of it for us, right? So if you do have it working, go back through and understand, hey, what did Bootstrap put in here? These things like card title and card text came right from Bootstrap. BTN and BTN primary, wait a second, we've seen those before. Where did we see those before? We use that BTN primary for our send. So that styling is coming right on over for us. So it's a little overwhelming to look at 15 lines of code and be like, whoa, where did all of that come from? But hopefully you can look through it a little bit and say, all right, how is this piecing together, and go from there. You're still working on it. Don't vote in the poll. If you are caught up, go ahead and vote. Or if you're just following along tonight and taking notes, that is also totally fine. That no option is for you. Give everyone 2 more minutes and then we'll keep going on this. Berlin, what's up?
My prettier is broken now.
Okay. Sure.
And my portfolio section is not lining up with the other ones, but I have the padding the same.
Okay. I would bet that they are one and the same problem.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna bring it over to this one. So share screen, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Where is it? No, I don't know where my stuff is. Oh, there it is. Can you see this?
No, the screen share didn't go through.
Oh, okay, sorry.
There you go. Okay.
Here's my
So
code.
I think the problem is going to be around the closing div somewhere around your container. So let's take a look on that. We've got all of our sections in here, and at the end of our section, we should have a closing div for the container, which you do. But if I click on that div and go all the way up, you notice it's not highlighting the word div. So there must be something wrong between the opening and closing of that container. So let's dive in to our last section because it looks like everything was working up until that point. My section closes out, so that's good. We go one further in. Come on, there we go. Looks like that's closing correctly. That's closing correctly. That's all right. And that's for our card body. Interesting. Just compare it to mine. So got the closing div for the container, the closing div for the section, and then we should have 4 closing divs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got all of those right. So maybe the problem. It's really, oh, that's really interesting. ePortfolio, ID portfolio. Problem's got to be up here. So we close that div out, and that div is closing. I click on that should be the last div that we close out. And you notice it's closing out all the way up here. So something must not be lining up on that one. So let's work our way out. We've got our input that's self-closing. We've got our text area that's closing here, but this indentation should be on the same line. Prettier will take care of that for us in 1 second. We got our button opening and closing, and then this div is closing out the row. Then we've got a closing of the form. So we've got some extra div tags in there.
Okay.
And let's just see if we get lucky and save. Nope, Prettier still mad at it. Oh. Step back in, save. Now Prettier is happy with us because we had some extra divs in there. And you'll notice what also got
Yay.
fixed was that fell in line.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. And you can see that takes me time, right? I'm not going slow on that just to make an example out of you. That takes me time to go through and say, all right, where's that extra div hiding out? But just clicking on them and making sure they're lining up is the right trick. And that is way easier to do when you're writing code at your own pace than you are when you're trying to follow along with me. So totally normal thing to happen. Anyone else need help? Okay, so the cool part is because we did all of the work to make this card work, we can just reuse this. Although I am noticing I made a mistake here. I did a col 3, but I only have 3 projects. So 3 times 3 does not equal 12. We would have an extra open gap over here. So I'm going to fix my col 3 to a col 4 to fix that. And then instead of writing all of this code out again, I'm going to be very, very careful about what I'm selecting and where I'm pasting it. So I want to select the entire column because I want 3 columns worth of cards. So I'm going to click on my div here and I'm going to look and my closing div is down here. So I don't want the div class row. I just want the col 4 and everything inside of it. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom and go all the way up until I've got my col 4. I'm going to copy that, put my cursor at the end of it, hit enter so I'm at the right indentation level, and I'm going to paste that 2 times. So I hit save on that. I come back over to my site, and just like that, I've got 3 of my weather apps showing up. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. But before you ask, if I shrink my size down a little bit, oof, that's not quite right. Got overlapping things, and now my weather app is hanging outside of my portfolio, and I'm not thrilled about that. All right, well, let's figure out what's going on there. I'm going to go up to my first card, and I've got a style on here, an inline style. First of all, we go, ew, inline styles. We don't like those, right? That just muddies up our HTML. What happens if I take that out, not only on the first card, but what happens if I take them out of all 3 of the cards? I save, I come back over, and just like that, we fix the problem. Well, where did that width come from in the first place? Bootstrap was trying to help us out. They were saying in this example, you use a width of 18 REM, which is a different unit to work with. Well, we don't want a width. Why don't we want a width? Because in this example, they're not using the grid system. Bootstrap can't cover every different scenario. But because we have a grid that is controlling the width for us, we don't want to override that grid system. We want the card to just naturally figure out how big the column is and take up that space. So by taking that style tag off, we are able to get the perfect formatting for what we want, not only for the cards, but also responsively, if I drag this out, because the grid system is set up for different screen sizes, that is going to let us update that. So take 2 minutes. If you want to use my link, you totally can. Go ahead, excuse me, and update these 2 other cards to match the content that I have on my site. That will be an exercise of reading through the HTML slowly, updating the links, and trying to get everything to line up. So I'm going to go up to, I'm going to add a note in here because I'm getting lost in div soup. I'm going to say card number 1 weather app. And then I'm going to go down to my second one and say card number 2 feedback form. And then I'm going to go down to my last one and say card number 3 MaxFlix. And that should make it easier to update the PNGs. This one's going to go to MaxFlix, I believe. Make sure that that worked. I update this and just work on making sure that all 3 of them are separate projects. Good time not to follow my HTML, but to work on it yourself. Make sure that all 3 of them are separate. And I will paste in the last image URL for you in the chat in case you need it. Make sure you're being thorough, updating the alt tag as well.
Hey, Max.
Yep.
Mine are stacked on top of each other and don't change even when I pull the screen out.
Okay. Give me 1 second, and then you can share your screen. Okay, go for it. Okay. So press remote. And you've got your columns inside a row. You had an extra closing arrow in there.
Okay. I was like, what did you just do? Thank you.
Damn it, Max, stop fixing things so quickly. Give everyone just a minute to update that content. Brandy, you look like you're ready to kill someone. I'm here for you if you need help.
I do. No, I really do. All right, yeah. I'm having the same issue that she was just having. But I'm going through and I can't find like anything extra. So I don't know.
Share your screen, let's take a look. Debugging is a skill that you will build up over time.
It's, yeah, that one.
Okay, so we start with remote access. And your problem is it doesn't become a problem until after the contact area in the browser. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to look, you've got your section, you've got your row, you've got your div for the col 4, and that closes out. Notice how far down I'm going. Here's your opening for your div for the card.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a col 4 inside the col 4, and then a card inside the col 4 that's inside another card. So we're like, ooh, boy. Okay, let's think about this. We want 3 columns that are all in the same row. So what we're going to do, this div is closing out the card body. That means that we want one more div that's going to close out the card. And then we want one final closing div that's going to close out this column. We're going to repeat that again because now this column is not in this col 4, it's actually inside of the row, which is where we want it to be. So I'm going to go down here. We've got our col 4. And before we start another col 4, we want to close that one out. And these are lining up. And we click on this, and that's closing out the div. So we come down, we make sure that this div is closing out. That means the 2 extra closing divs that we put in there, we don't need down here. So I'm going to take those out and try and save, and Prettier magically fixes all of our indentation. So now we've got our col 4s, and all 3 of them, whoops, didn't mean to do that. All 3 of them are right inside of our row. Go ahead and switch back to your browser and see if that fixed it.
Oh, okay. If I can, oh, okay, actually, I will, maybe it's not wanting to refresh, but I think I'm having.
There you go. You're all set.
Okay, cool. All right.
The only reason why we're spending class time on updating all 3 of them is because this is the first website that you're going to learn how to deploy with Nathan. So because of that, I'm having you guys update it because it's going to go live. Now, you don't need to keep it live after you learn how to deploy it. You don't need to use this portfolio as a requirement, but for some of you guys, it might be a good starting point just to have something out on the internet. So you're welcome to continue using it if you want, but it is not a requirement. So when you are all caught up, your site should look like this.
Yeah, my sidecar froze.
Does anyone need help?
I have a couple
Straggling divs?
yeah, no, I have the 30-second feedback form on top of MaxFlix right now.
Did you take out the style 18 REM on all 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Share your screen, let's take a look. Oh, you just have to update the image URL in card 3. The feedback form.png should say maxflix.png. All lower. There you go. Nice, easy
Okay,
fix.
thank you.
Anyone else need help?
It's not really the cards. I don't know. For some reason, I can't get my email to line up with the rest of my like text input.
Here's your take a look.
I got you. There you go. So I got the rest of that in there. Got
okay.
All that in there, but I don't know what's going on with that.
So I would bet that you used margin instead of margin top and margin bottom in your CSS.
You're a smart man.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Smart, experienced, jaded, take your pick. Anyone else need help?
I just have a question. So I'm using I'm using for the. Wait, maybe I'm solving it on my own. Hold on.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna go forward with 3 finishing touches and then we will call it a night. So first thing is on my site, I've got a nice footer element. And a footer is a good idea just to kind of pull every site together and put in some copyright information. So I'm gonna go down, I'm still inside my container div. But instead of adding in a new section, we're going to use another semantic element called footer. And then to get my copyright symbol to show up there, we're going to use our emoji picker again. So Control-Command-Space, and I'm going to do a search for copyright. And I think it's the second one that I want because this one looks like an actual emoji. This one looks like text, and I want the one that looks like text. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say 2023 and my company name. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to take a look on my site and it's there in black and I don't love the look of that. But because this is the only footer on my page, I can go ahead and style that directly without having to add in another class. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to target my footer and I'm going to make the background color black. I'm going to make the text color white. And I'm going to add some padding all the way around of 30 pixels. So I save, I scroll down, and just like that, I've got a nice little footer anchoring the bottom of my screen. I added my footer here, and I added a little styling to spruce it up, and that's going to anchor everything in place.
Max, could you go over how we got the C?
Yep, that's going to come from your emoji picker again. So Control-Command-Space is going to pop open your emoji picker, do a search for copyright, and then the first copyright is actually an emoji, and we don't want the emoji because it won't line up with our font color. So instead, we want to grab that second one that comes up there, and when you double click on it, it should insert for you. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at my final site. And I'm feeling like we're lining up pretty good here. I'm comparing the two of them. And this is what we would consider a flat design, right? It doesn't have a lot of depth to it, but it does give it a much cleaner look. If we wanted to add a little pop to it, if we didn't want to go for flat design, which is actually what some apps and some websites aim to do, but if I look at my final version, it looks like these sections are kind of popping off the page a little bit more, right? Well, we could add a border between them, and that would help separate out the sections. But I did something a little bit fancier here. I used something called a drop shadow or a box shadow. And by adding in that box shadow, it kind of not only separates out the sections from each other, but it makes it feel like they've got a little bit more depth, that one section is on top of another. To pull that effect off, I targeted each section in my CSS and added a box shadow. And box shadow is kind of like our border. It takes a couple properties. One, it needs to know vertically where should that shadow show up. So I actually put mine at a -10 because I want my shadow to show up above the section. Then I say 0 because I don't want the shadow to show up towards the right or the left anymore. I want it to show up spot on. Third, I put in 25 pixels. That's because I want the shadow to start here and go 25 pixels up. And then finally, I put in a color. And instead of doing black, because that shadow is a little too dark for me, I use this off-color black hex code. So go ahead and I hit save on that. I come back over to my site, and now I've got this nice black area showing up between all of my sections that really make them feel like they are stacked on top of each other. Now, you may say, I hate that look. I prefer the flat look. Or, oh, instead of doing a box shadow, maybe what I want to do is a border on the bottom. And it will be 2px solid. And let's just pick dark blue and save. If you like the look of this more, you could totally do that. This is your portfolio site. You can get creative on your CSS. I don't like that border bottom. I like this box shadow look because it makes it look like I took the next section and I put it just overlapping with the one above it. That is all design, right? That is all subjective, and you'll learn over time these tricks of the trade. Just like we used a little bit of a text shadow when we had our text in a background behind it, that made the text pop out a little bit more. Box shadow is a great way that we can make it feel like these items are kind of stacking on top of each other, and that is a core tenet of a design principle or design theory called material design. So we put in our box shadow. I'm scrolling up and down the site. I'm feeling like we've got pretty much everything here. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to go compare it to my live site. Got a little bit more padding on the top than I've got in here. That's okay. If you want to go in just that, you can. Click on my arrow. I'm making sure that's still working. Got my form all in here. I've got my items. I'm feeling pretty good. Before we get into the animation, to make it so when I first load the page, it fades in, take a minute, read through your code. Do you have any questions about how we achieved this, the order we achieved it? Do you think that you could pull this off on your own? Do you think that if I said, if I disappear tomorrow, could you rebuild this site? Don't worry, I'm not going to. You're stuck with me tomorrow, just like you're stuck with me next week. You do get a break from me the following week when you get into DevOps. But for right now, do you think you could pull this off? If not, go through the code, figure out what areas that you might be a little unsure about. Jen, for your shadow around your name, go up to where your name is in your HTML, which is going to be towards the top, and make sure you've got it like in an H1 and not in another section tag. And if you can't figure it out, let me know and we can screen share.
It's actually putting it around the whole name and the 2 little lines underneath it. It's almost like it put that whole thing in a section because it is in a section. I just don't
Share
know.
your screen. Let's take a look.
Get that out of there.
Yeah, so I'm more confused as to, oh, I know what it is. I got a little hacky on mine. Mine's doing that as well, but my shadow
background.
is the same exact as the background. Exactly.
So how do I cut like that one section out?
So that's a good question. Before we try it, I'm curious. I want to go up and take your that's not your, that's mine. Sorry, this is yours. I'm going to take your body color
Mhm.
and paste it in as the drop shadow. And let's just see. Do you like this effect with that orange?
Yeah, I like
Okay.
that.
So then I would leave it as is. That was an intentional design thing that I did, was that the shadow was the same as the background color to kind of make it blend into the background. If you
Gotcha.
didn't like it, there are ways of making that apply. The easiest would be to just add another class to the 3 or 4
Sections.
sections that you wanted it
Okay.
to apply to.
And just not do it to the, okay. All right, thank you.
There is a way to use something called a pseudo selector, which is like the hover thing, and
Mhm.
say apply it to all the sections except a section that's the first one. But that's getting a little complicated on our CSS selectors.
Okay.
So Quota, what's up?
So I recreated the little name and called it Quota Flex, and I'm trying to get that to be where your Max Flex is, and it's coming up, but it's like a broken link. And I'm not
Share
sure.
screen, take a look. The JPEG or the PNG file has to be in the same folder that the index.html is in.
Okay, I think I did. I'll share, but I think I have like 2 there, and that may be the issue.
Okay, yeah, share screen, let's take a look. Okay, so just take out the HTTPS because that's trying to send it out onto the internet and it's in your local files. So if you take that out, I would bet that's going to fix it. Okay. Oh, rough. Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
No problem. I saw someone else had a hand raised and then it went back down. Get your problem fixed. Whoever it was.
So it's not actually a problem with my code, but in my code, it looks like I've just got so many lines of indentations and I don't know why, because I went through and did the settings.
Share screen, let's take a look.
Okay. It's a lot.
Okay, so your indentation is, wait. What? You have confuzzled me. Your indent, how did you adjust my indentation but not?
I don't know what I don't know.
Okay, well, let me see. Let me see if this will fix it. No one follow me until I confirm.
Because mine's the one on the right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Does anyone else's screen share look like it's only indented 2 spaces instead of 4?
Yeah, mine does actually. It's showing more lines than it has indented. See what I mean?
Mine did that the other day too. It showed like a whole bunch of pinstripes. I had to go into the settings and change the all the tab widths to 4 because there was one of them that was 2, and then it stopped.
Okay, let me try and take back over because your tab width over here. Oh no, it's still set to 2. So if we go in here, your prettier tab width is now set to 4. Is there another tab width? That's just the terminal though. Print width, next column. Very confused by that. Try and do it by. Oh, editor.
I know
tab
that
size
at the
2.
bottom where it says tab size, I had to screw with that one time and that popped up a setting for it.
Okay, so a good, or everyone else to follow, if you are having an issue where the tab width on mine looks smaller than the tab width on yours, you can do a command comma to pull up your settings, do a search for tab up at the top, and then adjust the editor tab size to 4. And if you change that to 4, you don't have to save settings. You don't have to turn on settings sync here. If you close out that tab of your settings, come on, that one, then it should make your code. Okay, it's not letting me close settings for some reason, but that should fix it for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
I wonder, Max, if it's like because when it got changed, the live share was already open in another window, so it didn't. Sometimes you have to restart Visual Studio Code for the changes to take effect. So I wonder if that's why
it could be that. It also could be that my VS Code set to use tabs, not spaces, which is causing some syncing issues. But should be set. Okay, any questions on our code? Feel like we're understanding it? Ask now or forever hold your peace. And by forever, I mean you can also schedule one-on-ones.
Is
Okay.
there,
Oh, yeah.
sorry,
Go for
is
it.
there a way that when it's smaller, the name and the 2 first titles stay in the middle when you squish it down? Because right now it's sticking on the left, but everything else underneath is sticking on the bottoms.
So that is, we squeeze it down and now we've got it on 2 lines, right? And what you're saying is you would want this to still be on 1 line so it looks like it's centered.
No, like I put, I redid the border on that and I just put a, border radius on it. So it just looks a little bit better. And the shadow is right, or the words are right up against the shadow on the left-hand side when I squish it down in my name, but it's not in the about, the contact, or anything like that.
A little padding on that intro section would probably fix it for you.
So the
So-
left, so the, is the justify content center not gonna override that?
It is, this is centering it. So I'm curious here.
Here.
If I do a text center on that, if you put, is that what you're more going
Yeah,
for?
that's what I wanted to do.
So if you just throw a text center on that, that's totally fine.
Okay.
The other approach that you could take on that is if you didn't want this to wrap down onto 2 lines, you could also do a media query. And this is good for the whole class to hear. What we can do is we can say at media only for screens that have a max width. And I feel like I'm doing the syntax wrong. So let me pull up the documentation for this. Actually, you know what? I can get that from hopefully. No. Media. Okay, so it's at media only screen and the max width is like 600 pixels. And if the screen size is beneath that max width, I'm going to go find the intro section, get my H1 and set a font size of that down to like 50 pixels instead. So I save that, I come over here, my name is still big, but when I shrink it down, okay, maybe not quite at the right breakpoint. Let's see. Looks like
I like 480 or something. I don't remember the numbers.
737, 753, it's still a problem. It looks like it's like 775. Let's just pick. So I'll say 775 pixels. That shrinks it down. Now when I go bigger, it's still bigger text, but when I pull that down and hit a certain screen size, it's going to shrink that name down for me. And then if I pull it over, it's going to continue to do that. And I could even adjust that on this H3. I'm going to just pull it over so I can see what the font size is. That font size is 1.75 REM. So we can say, hey, still in the intro section, target the H3 and make the font size 1.5 REM if you're on that smaller screen. So if I pull this over, now my font size will drop down on both of them as soon as I hit that pixel level. So it's something to play with, but that is using our app media queries to be able to target different screen sizes and adjust the fonts based off of that. Okay, any other questions on this before we get into our animation? We won't finish our, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so does Bootstrap have any such classes, inbuilt classes to do so we can like not do media query and something that happens automatically?
Yeah, we're going to dive into that tomorrow. So you'll notice on our page, when we shrink this over, the contact form keeps on getting tighter and tighter, and then it starts like cutting off our inputs. Right. What we're going to learn about tomorrow is how we make it so our form will automatically wrap underneath the content instead of being over on the right side. You'll notice that same thing happens with my portfolio section. When you get down to a certain size, it's fine. But then when you really get small, it automatically pushes them down so they're all stacked on top of each other. We're going to learn how to do that tomorrow, only because it's a harder concept to wrap your head around than code to apply. So I'm going to hold that one off until tomorrow, but we will certainly be diving into that. And then we'll use those concepts on these project pages, which is going to be what we focus on tomorrow.
Cool.
Good question. Yes, I try to avoid media queries whenever I can. And the Bootstrap grid, because it has those responsive utilities built in, will be able to take advantage of them. Great question. Anything else? Okay, so we're just going to get our first fade set up here. We don't have to do a deep dive on this, but this is something that is new to CSS3, which has been a standard for a while. Almost all the browsers support this. It is how we do animations, CSS animations, to make it so our name fades in like it is. So in order to pull this off, 1 second to get, we have to define how the fade in works. In other words, we need to use this concept called keyframing, which is a animation concept to tell the computer where it should start and where it should end. So in order to do this, I'm going to go work at the top of my CSS, because this is all related to the intro section. And so just like we said at media here, using the @ sign in our CSS is a special syntax to say, hey, this isn't just a normal selector. This is some additional CSS that's going to make the site all work together. So I'm going to say @keyframes, and then I'm going to go ahead and define what this effect is going to be called. So I'm going to call this effect fade in. Can really call it whatever we want as long as we're consistent. Then we need to tell it what the fade in does at the starting point from the beginning, and then what we want the keyframe to be at the end, what we're going to. So we say from, which is a keyword in keyframing, and we say from the opacity of 0. Basically, we shouldn't be able to see the item at all. We're going to start from that point, and we're going to head to an opacity of 1 or 100%. Now, that doesn't pull anything off. That just tells our code, hey, if we use this animation called fade in, this is how we pull off that fade in. From there, we need to tell our CSS what that fade in is going to apply to. So I'm going to go down to my intro H1 that I already have a selector on, and I'm going to tell it to use an animation. And that animation needs a couple pieces of information to work. It needs to know what animation we're using. So this is called fade in because we called it fade in up here. And we're going to tell it how it kind of works. We're going to tell it to ease into that animation. And finally, we need to tell it how long is that animation going to take. So I'm going to tell it it's going to take 1 second. I save on that and I come over and I refresh and notice what my name is doing. We can adjust that if we wanted to. We could say 5 seconds and save that and get a nice slow fade in. I'll leave mine back down to 1 second. So all in my CSS, I didn't have to touch my index.html at all. I defined this new animation called fade in by using keyframes, which is like our app media query. It's a special syntax on CSS. We told it what to start at, an opacity of 0, what it's going to, an opacity of 1, and then we applied that animation as the fade in that we defined up here. We told it how to kind of do it, how to apply that, and then finally the duration of the animation.
I actually used the animation.css from Google, and it just like I mean this is better. I think I like this one.
Animation.css is I'm glad you brought it up. Animation.css for everyone else is like Bootstrap for animations. In fact, Bootstrap may have their own animation classes. I haven't looked into it, but this is kind of like how we build it from scratch to support native things in the browser. But just like Bootstrap has pre-built components for us, animate.css has some classes that we can apply directly to our HTML elements, and then we don't have to go through the work of building out the keyframes. Kenny, we're going to do it a little different. So we're going to use that same fade-in animation, but we're going to apply it down on our H3 as well. So to show you how we can use it, because if we look at my live site, you see it animates each line in one by one. In order to pull that off, what I'm going to do is target my intro section again in the H3. And I'm still going to use my animation, but instead of using the animation shorthand, I'm going to break this out a little bit. I'm going to say, hey, the opacity should start at 0. I want to use the animation name of fade in. That fade in is referencing the same fade in here, which we defined up here. Then we're going to say, we want the animation to be on a delay. And this is where your autocomplete is really going to help you. So we're going to animate that on a 1 second delay. In other words, don't start the animation until a second after the site loads. Then we're going to do an animation duration. So instead of 1 second that we used here, we're actually going to make it 2 seconds. And we're going to spell duration right, unlike me. And then finally, we have to tell the animation fill mode to be forwards. So if I save that and come over and take a look at my site, now when I refresh, my name fades in, then it waits a second, and then the next tagline fills in. So if you want, you can give that a try, playing around with these properties on both the code section and the arrow section. So if you look at my live site, this is the order that it animates in. Palash, what's up?
So does that mean like instead of opacity, we can use like literally any property, like padding to font size from 10 to 20 or background color or color?
Yeah, you can do all of that in the keyframing, and that will like produce your effect. So if you wanted to go from like padding 20 to padding 0, that would essentially animate the element up as it's removing that padding. So yeah, you can use a lot of them. Things like color might be a little tricky. It might not give you like that same color effect that you're looking for with the hex. But you can use a lot of the properties like padding and margin, opacity, stuff like that. As long as the browser knows how to animate them between the two keyframes, you can definitely get creative with those effects.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. That is all I've got for you guys tonight. Tomorrow, we will dive into wrapping this up with the project page over here. And we will also dive into how we can get our responsiveness working. So when we hit certain screen size breakpoints, the content kind of rearranges itself on the page. So that's what we will finish up with tomorrow. Depending on how quick we go, I may pose a challenge for you guys to go out and do what I did with YouTube. Go find a little section of a site and try and recreate it. That's only if we've got time tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll dive into responsiveness, and then we'll get into how we build out our portfolio page. And then coming in on Monday, we're going to dive into Intro to Computer Science. Following that, we've got DevOps and then JavaScript all coming your way. Stick around for a couple minutes tonight in case you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow.
Bye, people.
One question.
Yeah.
For over the weekend, like where to from here with CSS?
With CSS or in general with the curriculum?
CSS.
So this is pretty much it. If you wanted to do a deeper dive on CSS, I would say check out Free Code Camp. And then after Free Code Camp, if you really wanted to level up your skills, the next step from here is something called SAS, S-A-S-S, which is very similar to SCSS. They use the same framework. That's kind of your next level of CSS. And then if you are looking on the framework side of expanding your skills, the two that I would check out, one is called Material UI. Material UI is one of them. And then the other one is called Foundation. Foundation is very similar to Bootstrap, but instead of having pre-built components with a lot of styling on them, it is kind of right out. They give you the same utilities, but then you need to apply your own styling to it. So Foundation is one, Material UI is another, SAS is very popular, and there is, Gagan, what's the framework that you were using?
Tailwind CSS.
Tailwind, thank you.
Don't
Tailwind,
use that.
Tailwind is a very interesting one. It's very different from Bootstrap, but there's more to learn in terms of what the classes are. But it's closer to Foundation than it is to Bootstrap in that if you learn Tailwind like the back of your hand, you should never have to write a single line of CSS. because all of those classes are pre-made for you, like down to the padding and borders and all of that. So it has a steeper learning curve than Material UI, which has a steeper learning curve than Bootstrap, but it is very powerful if you choose to become what I claim is a CSS wizard, which I'm like a CSS apprentice compared to people who have mastered Tailwind.
Tailwind is really good, but you have to remember that whatever you're doing now, you have to forget that kind of, to learn that. Because that's what I struggle, like I make divs, rows, that's how it is. Like the way Max is teaching, then you have to like kind of put that on the side and learn on new way. I don't think, I mean, you can do it. I did it, but it's just hard.
Thank you. So one more question, like what's the most on-demand skill as far as like front end is concerned right now, out of all these, Tailwind, Material, and Foundation? Like, what should
I don't really have an answer for you there, because there are two ways of approaching that. One is saying, where's the job demand in terms of number of sites built with it, versus the more conceptual, like which way to write your CSS is the best. Bootstrap, I would say, is by far the most in demand, because most templates and WordPress sites that you see will use Bootstrap. So that is the reason I teach it, not only because it has the lowest learning curve, but it's the most widely used on production websites that you can find on the internet. So I would say that Bootstrap is the most in use. It's also the most hated because every Bootstrap site looks like every other Bootstrap site. So if you talk to people who use Material UI, they'll tell you that Material UI is better because out of the box, it just looks better than default Bootstrap components. If you talk to people who make Tailwind sites, they'll tell you that Tailwind is better because they don't have to write any CSS, and that makes more sense to them once they get it working. If you talk to WordPress developers, they'll tell you that CSS isn't really important. What's important is learning the PHP to get the right content to show up on the right pages. So I don't have a de facto answer for you there. And it's really dependent on, if you came to me and say, well, after the boot camp, I want to make websites for people, what should I learn next? I would say, don't do a deep dive on CSS, go learn WordPress, do a deep dive on WordPress, because that's going to be the best platform for making client websites in. But if you came back to me and said, I want to make custom websites from scratch, what would you recommend learning next? I would say go learn Tailwind, because that's going to make you more appreciative of CSS than any of the other frameworks. But if you came to me and said, I want to learn how to make web apps as quickly as possible, I would say go learn Material UI, because that looks a lot better and is going to feel a lot more modern than Bootstrap does. So the answer is it depends, and that's very subjective, right? If you ask that of me compared to Ryan or Nathan, who are going to be your two other instructors, they may have a completely different answer for you, which is probably going to be different than Gagan's perspective of, the order that he learned things. And I'm sure Caitlin could chime in there. And Caitlin started a new job on Monday. And that is more WordPress heavy. So she's probably going to have a different answer for you than what advice I could give you.
Yep. Perfectly makes sense. Thank you.
I kind of like I'm on the website right now. I think I like the Material UI a little better.
Material UI is more similar to Bootstrap than it is to Tailwind, but it's just much cleaner in terms of its components, and it just looks better out of the gate. But with that said, there's a very good reason I don't teach that in our curriculum yet, even though I would love to. It's because Bootstrap has 10 times the lion's share of the market and in use in production websites than Material UI does. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of that.
I will probably have more to say as I get further into the job, but it's been onboarding this week. So yeah, I don't have a lot to add.
And they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like you can use Bootstrap with WordPress. You can use
Yeah.
Material UI with WordPress. Material UI kind of started out more at Material UI is much newer. Material UI is, or the material design standard is supported by Google. And it is kind of app first compared to Bootstrap, which was more for websites. And then they started supporting more web apps. So that is a leg up that Material UI has. Is the slightly newer one is that it's just more app focused, which can be a pro, but can also be a con. Sorry, I don't have a straightforward answer for you there, but hopefully that gives you an idea of where to head.
No problem. That actually perfectly makes sense.
Cool. Any other questions I can answer tonight? Awesome. Have an awesome evening, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And give Caitlin a chance to answer that question. There you go.
Sorry, it's a full stack web developer position in the marketing department.